Riding your bike up and over a big rock or log can be scary with lots of consequence if you come up short. The good news is that we have a new way to practice this technique so you can learn it with zero consequence and be prepared the next time you find yourself in this situation. Even better, what if I told you that you could learn this skill on flat ground? My name is Aaron, welcome to Super Rider. On this channel, we break down complex bike skills into easy to learn techniques so you can quickly apply it to your riding. Today, we're going to learn the basics of a pedal up, sometimes called a punch. This technique is a much more controlled and simplified way to ride up onto obstacles. Both tires stay in contact with the ground or the obstacle, unlike the bunny hop, which requires a much more complex movement. You basically do a little front wheel lift, then transfer your weight from the back of the bike to the front, which pulls you onto the obstacle. I'm going to break this all down for you. I think you'll be surprised with how easy it is to practice each element. Let's start by talking about your bike setup for practicing this skill. My mindset when it comes to learning new skills is to simplify everything down to the most basic elements and then start adding things back in. So let's start by locking out our suspension as much as we can. This will help us understand the basic motion of the bike, and once you're feeling confident with the movement, feel free to open it back up. Next, drop your seat down. Even though we're going to be doing wheelies in this technique, it's a standing wheelie, so we want to keep this out of the way. I also recommend flat pedals when you're practicing this, partially because we're going to be doing small wheelies, and partially because you can rock your foot on the pedal to help with your side-to-side balance. I'm loving these Deity T-Mac pedals right now. I'll put a link below if you want to get a pair for yourself. Lastly, let's talk about your hand position on the bike. We want to have our hands as wide as possible on the bars for balance, and we use one finger for the brakes. This gives us a little extra control for the movement and the braking. Diving into the pedal up technique, we're going to break it into two sections. First, we'll focus on the front wheel lift, then we'll go over the back wheel lift. After that, we'll pull it all together on flat ground and then apply it to an obstacle. We're going to start off this whole thing by practicing a small standing wheelie. You may have already practiced the wheelbase drill that I've recommended in previous videos or on Instagram, and that single skill is the foundation for the pedal up. Two things are happening at the same time when we do a standing wheelie. First, our body moves from the front of the bike to the back of the bike, and that makes the front wheel light so we can get it off the ground. Our hips move behind the seat, which is an important element for bringing up the front wheel. As our body is moving from front to back, we're also adding in a pedal. You're going to start with your opposite foot at the top of the pedal stroke, and there's a good reason for that. You may have done wheelies starting with your strong foot in the past, but when we do a pedal up, we always need to start with the opposite foot. The reason is that we want our strong foot to come around just as our front wheel is landing on the obstacle. That way we're in our strongest possible position on the bike. So that's why we practice starting with the opposite foot. It might feel kind of weird at first to start with your opposite foot, but trust me, it's worth practicing this way. Let's spend a bit more time focusing in on this standing wheelie movement. Pick a line on the ground and roll up to it with your opposite foot on the top of the pedal stroke. As your wheel gets to the line, shift your weight back and push that opposite pedal. Your front wheel should pop up and you'll roll just a short distance on your back wheel. Be sure to keep your back brake covered. If the front wheel comes up too high, grab that brake and it'll drop back down. If you want to build some extra confidence here, see if you can coast for a little extra on the back wheel. This will give you more time to get comfortable in the position of being on the back wheel at the end of that first pedal stroke. Spoiler alert, the more comfortable you are in this position, the higher up you'll be able to ride eventually. This is the first half of the skill, and now we're going to focus in on the back wheel lift. Let's continue with our flat ground practice. To lift our back wheel off the ground, we use a technique called the pedal scoop. When you point your toes at the ground, it forces the pedals to stick to your shoes. If you keep your feet pointing down and then you push back and up, you'll scoop the pedals into the air, and that brings your back wheel off the ground. You can practice your pedal scoops by standing next to the bike and just pushing your back foot into the pedal. Lock up your front wheel and give it a shot. This is a great way to get a feel for it. You can also roll slow and put your weight super far forward on the bike and then pedal scoop while you roll. I try to use both feet, but when you watch me ride, my back foot always looks quite a bit more pronounced with the scoop. Now that we have a feel for the pedal scoop, let's try to put it together with the front wheel lift. Pedal and lift your front wheel off the ground, and then as soon as your front wheel touches back down on the ground, lift the back wheel off. That transition between lifting each wheel is going to come in handy in the next phase. So you basically have the motion locked in at this point, lifting the front wheel and then lifting the back. Now we can apply it to some small obstacles to get a better feel for how it works. A good curb or a small rock can be a perfect thing for practicing this. What we really want to focus on now that we have the basics of the technique is our timing with the pedal up and the pedal scoop. One of the best things about pedal ups or the punch technique is that we are rocking some giant wheels. And as long as your wheels keep rolling, you'll be surprised what you can roll over. Remember, your wheel doesn't need to entirely clear the obstacle when you ride over it. You only need to get just over halfway up the obstacle and the wheels will do the rest. Okay, before we take this to an obstacle, if this kind of detailed skills breakdown is helpful for you and you want to continue to improve as a rider, it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe to the channel. I've got so many tutorials lined up for this year and I want to make sure that you see them when they come out. So let's try riding up a small obstacle here. I'm going to take off about the same distance away from the obstacle as the height of the obstacle. That's my general rule and it usually works out just right. Remember to start with your opposite foot on the top, rock your weight back as you pedal, and then as soon as your front wheel lands on the obstacle, we shift our weight forwards and pedal scoop. Curbs are kind of awesome for this practice because most of them have a little rounded corner at the top, so you don't have to worry too much about pinch flats or anything else. One thing a lot of people do wrong at this stage is grab their back brake when their back wheel gets onto the obstacle. Don't do that. Keep rolling and let the wheel do its job, otherwise you'll slide off the back of the obstacle. Repetition is going to be key here when it comes to getting your timing and balance just right on the pedal up. Start small and slowly work your way up as you get more confident. You can actually pedal up super high onto obstacles if you do this right. Check out the 2-foot box in my warehouse. Even with 29-inch wheels, I can roll right up this thing. Wonder what would happen if I put a pallet on top of it. I think that adds a few inches. The best part about learning this skill is that it works just as well for riding off of obstacles. You can learn that skill right now by watching this video.